I am so thrilled to be back for another deck creator chat today. My chat is with Krista Flute of the fabulous Landback Tarot and Tarot Oracle of Colonization. Excuse me. I am just going to wait for Krista to pop on, and then we'll be able to have a chat together. Yay! I'm so excited. Okay. Let's see. Okay.
Hello.
Awesome. Hi, Krista. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Excellent. It looks like it's as sunny for you today as it is for me. It's so nice to have this gorgeous August weather. We've gotten so much rain. I don't know about you guys. It's just been an absolute downpour.
Also, so much rain, and it was a cold summer. So today is wonderful and amazing.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. It makes such a difference to have the sun and the heat and everything.
Yeah, I enjoy the sun and the heat. I'm all for
it. Yeah, I tend to wilt when it gets really super hot, but thankfully we have a fan and it cools down a bit in the evenings. So I find nighttime is the hardest when it's really socked in, but when you get that little bit of reprieve, it's really nice. And I know I'll be looking back come December and wishing that I had the heat and the sunshine, because when it gets all socked in and cold. Yeah, so thank you so much for chatting with me. I'm so excited to talk about your fabulous deck. It's one of the card decks that I pulled for the month of, well, Leo season, really. I used to do decks by months, but then I kind of felt like it was nice to incorporate some of the energy of the astrology season in terms of my picks. And this one is so fabulous. I love that you have such colorful, vibrant cards, and the illustrations are so lovely, and it just seemed to really encapsulate that fiery Leo energy so beautifully.
I'm a Leo rising.
Yeah. Especially
I like
it's so
big
great
and bold and colorful. And there's an aspect of me that likes really quiet and muted, but I've never personally been able to achieve it.
Yeah, I hear you with that. Hence the bright red shirt and all the color. I'm intrigued by minimalism and all the muted colors and like the nice, like serene atmosphere, but I've never been able to achieve it for myself, and I don't think I ever will, because I'm so drawn to color, and the vibrancy, and it just kind of provides such a beautiful lift. And I feel like it embraces nature too. Like, you go outdoors and there's so many beautiful, vibrant colors. It's not muted at all, except for maybe fall, but
Yeah, I mean, fall can be pretty vibrant too.
Yeah, that's true. It's more like end of November when everything's died off and it's all brown, but that's not exactly, it's its own thing. Yeah, and the cover of your book is so beautiful and vibrant as well. I can't get over the use of color. It's just so beautiful.
I have
So tell me.
making it. The photograph in the background is a photograph over our meadow in the wintertime. And then the trees on it are a strand of birch trees. They're just over here a little bit. And I took a picture of them, and I did a bunch of things to the same. I cut out the birch trees and then did a bunch of things to the same trees over and over again, and put them in there. Yeah. Mom, not right now. You can have.
I love all the layers of color that you've included with the textures and things here, like all the different reds, and then here there's all the multicolors too. Like, you've just done such a gorgeous job with this background. I feel so drawn to it. Like, I can obviously tell it's birch trees, which I absolutely love, and it also ties into the beautiful backs of your cards too, which are so lovely. Yeah, that's so cool. So with the illustrations for your cards, did you go off of photos for a lot of them, or like what was your inspiration for the designs? Because I know you've done depictions of some friends and people that you know have been in different situations in Canadian history. So was it a photo that you used, or just kind of recollection from memory, or how did?
So,
approach that?
yeah, I'm very, very visual. I
Mm.
rarely need a photograph to draw from. Um,
Yeah,
there's two times where I was, had an image in my mind of what the card was going to look like and what the energy was. And as I was drawing it, I looked at it and I was like, oh, that's this friend's face and body. Um,
yeah,
and so there was times where I unintentionally drew friends. Um,
yeah.
and that was like really, really cool. And there was
Hmm.
times where, I took a certain image. Some of them, like the Five of Drums, um,
Yeah.
I the Five of Drums and the Two of Drums, which are
All
both
right.
like West Coast moments. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
so both of these, now the Two of Drums is based on my friend Jess, and the Five of
Nice.
Drums is based on one of the invasions of Wet'suwet'en. Um, but in both
Hmm.
of these cases, I looked at a bunch of photos from that moment, and I
Yeah.
consolidated like a whole bunch of things into one picture. You know,
Yeah.
yeah. So you won't find a photograph that looks exactly like this particular pose in the Five of Drums, because I looked at a series of photos from that day and then put
Yeah.
them into an image that set it all together for me. And
Yeah.
with Jess on the Two of Drums, I looked at a whole bunch of photos from that oil spill cleanup, and did the same thing, like collaborated everything I saw from that day into
Yeah.
into one moment. um so that's what I did
Yeah.
there. And
Oh, that's
there wasn't
beautiful.
a moment where Jess was holding a drum and the berries, but there were drums throughout that day, and there was berries and stuff too. And so that's why they're in there. And then I
Yeah.
liked how the oil spill kind of looked like wings.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really
So
does.
there was a variety of ways in which
Oh,
I drew things. Yeah.
yeah. That's such a beautiful way to bring those different elements together, because I don't feel like any one photo can really capture the complete nature of the experience. So I love that you brought those different components together and made it your own. That's really amazing. Um,
Yeah.
so what inspired you to create this deck, and what was the creation process like? I know it took place over a period of time. So what was that like for you, and what drew you to, yeah, create it?
So it's about 6 years ago that I first decided, you know, I was going to create a deck that represented myself, the Indigenous community I know, and that would relate to us. And
Mm-hmm.
I kept trying, and as I was like creating the art and looking at how am I going to do this and actually print this deck, I kept coming up against all these roadblocks that were largely tied to my financial situation. Um,
Yeah.
and even though like my financial situation has fluctuated over that period of time, it was still never stable enough to like have the things I needed to do. Um,
Yeah.
and still it's impacted me through this. So there's times I gave up, there's times it just felt blah. And
Mm-hmm.
when I started, so there's been 5 attempts in 6 years. So essentially about an attempt a year.
Yeah.
When I got started on this one, I I had this block about like, well, where is it actually going to go? Um,
Mm-hmm.
but starting with my friends being like, this time you have to like make this happen.
Yeah.
And just circumstances coming into play, I was able to get through it all. And there's still like,
Mm.
you know, I'm like, I'm nervous about doing my taxes because most of the payments for like getting this deck printed and everything were way higher than my daily, weekly, or monthly banking limits. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I've like transferred, you know, my top amount to a friend of mine, like, you know, so many days a week. And
Mm-hmm.
then she and her husband have been making the payments for me. I'm like,
Yeah, yeah.
but you know, that was a real issue.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
for sure.
yeah, but so I feel the art this time was better, and it was meant to happen this time, and that's why everything came into place. Um, I think the year and where I was at impacted it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, months before I started doing this, and, you know, before COVID hit in 2020, um, the rail blockades and another Wet'suwet'en invasion had gone down. And
Mm-hmm.
my daughter, who at the time was 19, was down in the cities doing some speeches and stuff like that. And she called
Mm-hmm.
and she was like, "Do you want me to come home so that you can go to the blockades?" And she thought she'd watch Hanu, my 7-year-old. And I was like, no, like, I'll stay and you go. And
Mm-hmm.
there is this hard period of adjustment to like stepping back and
Yeah, yeah.
having like my kids step forward. And I've related to the 9 of Weapons through this a lot. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, you in so many different ways, but um,
Yeah.
it also, when I learned to like let go and stop micromanaging and stop trying to control all my fears about, you know, not having a whole lot more control than I did, and
Yeah.
you know, not being the one making decisions, and my 19-year-old making huge decisions in life. When I
Mm-hmm.
learned to step back from that, like, and you know, be ready to start moving into a new stage in my life,
Mm-hmm.
I had the space to do this in a way that felt like it hit a lot more than my other attempts.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that whole releasing control is a tough process. Like I can so relate to that. And when it has to do with your kids too, there's this whole other layer that gets added to that, right? Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
so grateful that you had the opportunity to put the time into the deck because it's amazing. So what was I'm so curious to know what your process was with figuring out which cards were going to be related to which incidents or people or energies. I mean, there's the structure of the tarot that's kind of set up. So how did you go about figuring all of that out? Like, did you map it out? Did you just kind of go on instinct? I'm so
As
curious to know what your process was.
as I went to each card and thought about that card's energy, and that wasn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily in order. Sometimes I do it bunch at a time. Other times I didn't. Um, well, first I had an idea of like what um, like colors I wanted each deck to their color theme, right? Each
Yeah.
suit. And then
Yeah.
I just thought about each card individually, and
Mm-hmm.
and thought about what that meant to me, and how in my, oh, there's a hair. Um, it's bigger than my chihuahua. It's so funny.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
so as I thought about each card, I thought, what do I think of? When have I seen or experienced or watched this understanding unfold? And then that's how I came up with what the picture would look like, or sometimes the person. As I was thinking about the Empress, and I actually did the Empress and the Emperor cards really separately, although I had titled them really early on. And so I did the Empress, which became Today's Future, first, and I titled those two right then. But I didn't know what yesterday's foundation was going to be till I got to it. But as I thought about the Empress, what I kept thinking of was my friend Melissa. And so in our Indigenous parenting group, she shows a lot of, harvesting, natural harvesting, and has also the most amazing yard turned into garden.
Oh,
And
amazing.
so I was like, you have to be this person. And so she sent me a bunch of pictures of harvesting with her kids. And
that's awesome.
yeah.
I love how you've titled that card too, like Today's Future and Yesterday's Foundation. That's such a nice switch up of the traditional Empress and Emperor roles. I find them personally to be very hierarchical, whereas this is so nurturing, and it's looking at developing the seeds of the past and building towards the future. And I just love how you've kind of reclaim the energy of those cards in a really special way. Like it really, I really, actually, one of the aspects that I love about this deck is the ways that you've re-envisioned or renamed some of the cards. Like I really love how it encapsulates the energy. Like the Fool stays the same, but I love that the Magician is the Elder. Like that's such a powerful interpretation of that particular, there's so much agency in the Magician, and I love that it has that link to the knowledge of elders. Like that really resonated with me in a beautiful way.
It was sort of
what would you...
It was a twofold decision to make the Magician the Elder. I think colonialism's hierarchy has encouraged us to subconsciously apply hierarchy to our elders and our healers. And, becoming elders and healers should be much more accessible. We had lots of elders and healers prior to colonialism, and reminding us that they're like a sort of beginning level of knowledge, even though they hold like years of knowledge, it's still like, they're not up on this pedestal. They aren't like 9 or 10, they're 1 and 2. That was really important to me also.
Yeah, there's an accessibility with that, so it's not something that's beyond your reach. It's something that you can engage with and learn from, and I love that. It feels like a very nurturing energy. I love that the High Priestess is the healer, and then you had mentioned Today's Future and Yesterday's Foundation, and I love this so much. The Emperor is one of the cards that I've struggled with most in the tarot, and I made my peace with it a little bit after 2020, just kind of working intensively with that card. But I love the idea of Yesterday's Foundation. Like that resonates so deeply with me, because it really takes everything that's nurturing and stable and solid and good about that card and really encapsulates it. And I appreciate that. And then your Hierophant is a charlatan. I love this with Mr. Trudeau here. And
when I thought about these cards and decolonizing them, I thought about like, what are the impacts of the things that this card represents on our lived lives? Is this positive energy? And so in the case of Today's Future and Yesterday's Foundation, there are so many positive aspects of that card that just cannot be fully understood with such harmful titles as emperors and empresses, or presidents or prime ministers or whatever. That I wanted to take that out so we could focus on those positive aspects, because we can still see how they can go too far and be negative.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's nothing about the Hierophant. There's not much about the Hierophant that I think has any positive influence on the lives of colonized people. And when I think about fives and the impacts on the fives, the importance of how negative that card really can be, and
Yeah.
how much we are sold on that card as like this positive thing that isn't very comfortable to most tarot readers. I think it's really interesting, and so I wanted to unpack that. Like, you know, the Hierophant
Yeah.
doesn't have, you know, and when we add this sort of power that the Hierophant holds to spiritual leaders, because colonialism, you know, taught us to do that, we bring in those
Yeah.
same toxicities. And when we try to put ourselves into their systems and structures, we bring in those same toxicities. And so for me, I thought that in this case, those negative traits are really important to reading the fives, as well as to like reading the impact of this card on our lives.
Yeah, that's another, the Emperor and the Hierophant, I think, are the two that I've struggled with most in the tarot, just because they have that hierarchical, patriarchal aspect that I find, I know I'm not alone in saying I find problematic. So it was a good way to highlight that in this particular card. And then the Lovers and the Chariot, I put everything in order so that I could reference it quickly while we were talking about it. And I love this Strength card as well. It's absolutely beautiful. And I
Yeah,
love
so
that
this is
spirit of
based
rebellion.
on a photograph. And, you know, there's some moments in this deck, like the Strength card, which are just so iconic. I would
Yes,
not change them.
I think it's this one here in the
Yeah,
guidebook.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's
wonderful
a
to use
powerful,
that also
powerful image.
in 2013.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And,
That's power in there.
you know, putting in the guidebook links, putting reference, so the guidebook references you to my website, where there's a page of guidebook links, and there's articles to read and videos to watch, so that folks can know these moments
Yeah,
also if
she's
they
in
don't.
here. Yeah,
And I
this is
think
such an
like,
amazing resource for that. Sorry to
yeah, I
interrupt.
think a full story of, you know, this moment highlights, you know, the necessity of multiple roles, of Amanda's role of that, like, you know, huge strength to put oneself in that much vulnerability, to like
Yeah.
bring like pause, a huge pause to a large moment, you know. It's really powerful. And then everything else that happened, like Elsa Patag used a multiplicity of actions, from, you know, what people call peaceful to what people call violent.
Yeah.
And they used them together, and that was really effective.
Yeah, that's huge. Being able to blend those two things together, and just the resiliency that it takes to stand up like that. Like, that's huge. And I love that you have the link. Like, I found this guidebook has been such an amazing resource in terms of the links that you provided and the historical context for so many of these cards too. I appreciate it so much, because many of these are events that I was familiar with growing up, but it helped me put it into context as an adult, and as someone who's I'm working on a lot of anti-racism work and social justice with my kids, and it's allowed me to put that into context with them as well, which has been really amazing, and I'm so appreciative. Another one, I love all of these cards, but the Hermit as a storyteller is amazing. And I remember when you did a reading for me, I believe this card came up, and it was this idea of not just going internal and introspective and reflective in the role of the hermit, but then taking what you've learned and bringing it outward and sharing those teachings and that understanding. And I just love that so much, because there's so much power and agency in that. Like, I often think of the hermit as being this kind of soft, introverted kind of distancing card, but this allows the card to have so much agency, right, and movement, and I love it so much.
Thank you. I often, when I read the Hermit, I think about, well, why is the Hermit doing this? What is the Hermit gaining out of this? What's the Hermit supposed to do afterwards? And there's no point in gaining, that much introspection or knowledge, or esoteric ability or any of that if you're just going to stay in that cave or on a hilltop and keep it all to yourself. Like, what's the point? How does that change anything? So I've often thought the Hermit's role is to teach and to storytell, and so that's what I wanted to show there. But I also wanted to put it in, the role of the everyday, when we parent or auntie or uncle kids in our lives, this is like everyday sort of mundane aspect of this role. And, parents can feel isolated, like the Hermit card, especially at night. And so I also drew on that kind of energy.
Just one sec. I'm just going to boot him out. He's getting work. Oh, somebody probably walked by the house. I don't know.
Okay.
What's going on? Yeah, no, this is him.
Aww. And that is not a dog. That is my 7-year-old.
That's awesome. Yeah, when he lacks in size, he makes up for in volume. And both him and our cat are so hyper protective of the house, and he barks whenever anybody comes by, and she sits in the window and growls at anybody that comes too close. It's hysterical. Cheers, by the way. I have some cold brew coffee. I get nervous before I do lives, and so it's helpful to have a little, pick me up.
Yes.
So, I love that so much. And I love that idea of nurturing that comes out of it too, and sharing knowledge and teaching. And I love too, because so often when I thought about the Hermit in the past, it was this idea of like going to a mountaintop or a cave somewhere and retreating from life. But it's not really possible to do that for most of us in a day-to-day life. So I love that this gives that opportunity to blend those ideas with day-to-day life and our lived experience, because that it makes it feel much more accessible to take that journey, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And
I love that. Yeah, that's wonderful. And I love that the Wheel of Fortune is the mirror. So I'd love to know a little bit more about your inspiration for this. This is the 4 seasons, right? In terms of, did I get that right?
Essentially. So one of the things I wanted to do with this deck was create an Indigenous deck, but I didn't want to provide those new age culturally appropriating spiritual Karens more content under their belt. So it was really important for me to make an Indigenous deck that also protected my culture. And the mirror image is a symbol that exists in a multitude of cultures around the world, including my own. And it does represent that Wheel of Fortune, that as above, so below. Like, things are going to keep moving. You have no choice but to go through these cycles and these systems, and they're repeated above and below. So I felt that using the mirror let me use a universal symbolism that I could explain in a compact way as to why it fit the Wheel of Fortune card without selling my culture, because it wasn't necessary to do so. Because it's fairly universal.
Yeah, that's wonderful. The Wheel of Fortune is my card for this year. And I just love the imagery and that sense of the mirror and cycles and also what's being reflected back to you that you can then work through and change. It's really powerful imagery. Um, I also really like the idea of the Hanged One as dead time, because so often, I'd love to hear your inspiration for this card. It's that sense of enforced pause and restriction is really clear here, and I think that's really fantastic. Yeah.
The Hanged Man is one of those cards where I think we really separate ourselves from the symbolisms that's actually in the card. And I think part of the symbolism in tarot is progression. In the RWS, it goes justice, hanged man, death. And I think we really gloss over that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of symbolism present in there. As a hanged man, as that force restriction, as you know, there's also anti-Semitic symbolism in that card, which reminds us that who is most likely to get hanged? It's, those that the oppressive systems of white supremacy are coming down on. And I didn't think I could express that in the Hanged Man without us still just glossing over the fact that this is actually a really intensely difficult time, and how it plays out for you has a lot to do with justice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And whether you meet death in the next step or not, these are so heavily tied together, and they aren't entirely within your control. While capital punishment still exists in some places, it doesn't exist everywhere. And dead time falls in that place very much. It is experienced most by marginalized folks who don't have the privilege of innocent until proven guilty. And so they're stuck here in this dead time. And those scales of justice are not going to be as balanced. And so I thought it brought us back in line. I think probably in, a few centuries ago, we probably would look at the Hanged Man a lot more intently than we do now. And so I wanted to bring it back down to reality, and also the reality that there is a racial aspect to this card. There was in the beginning, and there is now.
No, definitely.
Put it on the counter, Nanu. Actually, put it back in put it in the counter. I'll clean it up after.
And then with the Temperance and the Devil, this has to do, the Temperance card has to do with birth alerts. And then the Devil is strangling patriarchy. And I love that, again, it's grounded in lived experience, and there's a sequence to that, right? It's like this experience that leads into restricting the systems that create that in the first place. If I'm reading that right. And I love that all of these cards tell a story. They tell their own unique story, separate of the major arcana and tarot, and it's very much grounded in lived experience, and it's very relevant to what's happening right now. And the images are very poignant, and I really appreciate that storytelling aspect that has gone in terms of what's currently happening.
Thank you. So, I think Temperance is a lot like the Hanged Man in that we think about the balance and the beauty that the Temperance card often holds, but like Temperance comes after death. You're balancing shit and finding temperance because life is like at its like pressure points. And even if you successfully made it through that metamorphosis, like, you know, this is a point where like your wings are drying, things are not steady, they are not like, that temperance isn't easy.
No.
And yeah, and so that allowed me bring that in, and then keep that progression going of how like this one thing impacts like the next thing coming.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, I love the juxtaposition of the tower and the shooting star as well. And yeah, everything falling apart, and then that sense of hope and optimism. But this carries forward from the Devil card and the Temperance card very much. And what you said about Temperance makes so much sense to me, because it's easy to dismiss it as, oh, well, I need to find balance in my life. But that kind of negates the difficulty that causes you to seek that balance in the first place, and the challenge of that card, because it's not a warm and fuzzy card. I mean, I don't think anything in the tarot is either warm and fuzzy or difficult. It's all a mix of everything all together. But I like that the Temperance card brings that extra layer of complexity to it, because it really is a complex card. And I love the progression and what you wrote in the guidebook about the 3 primary flags and the destruction of them, the colonial archetypes with the Mexico flag and US flag and Canadian flag, if I'm remembering correctly. And then this is the money raining down for capitalism as well, which I love. And it's looking at dismantling some of those structures, because oftentimes when the tower card comes up, it can be a really scary card for people, because it's like, oh my God, everything's falling apart. But sometimes those things need to fall apart in order to move forward in new and different ways that are more healing and more healthy. And I feel like this particular card really encapsulates that energy. And I mean, oh my gosh, this star is absolutely stunning. What was your inspiration for it? I'd love to know.
This is one I just imagined in my head. And so I used an 8-pointed star that's really popular culturally. And I wanted the tower burning in the distance. And so you see the red in the background there. And this was just me imagining, you know, that moment when you got in like enough distance between you and that burning tower to you know, have some hope and think about what comes next, and see what's out there beyond the systems. Yeah. And I mean, the tower is one of my favorite cards, because like, it's literally the most radical card in the deck. It's telling you the systems and structures are not actually supporting you. Tear them the fuck down. It's actually tells you that right in the deck. Like, that's what I want to have happen. So do it really literally. But I'm also really aware that, you know, to do this, to pull these systems and structures down, those of us who are most negatively impacted by them are going to be hurt the most. And we, more than anybody, need to understand how much these systems and structures are not ever in any way going to be able to be reformed enough to help us to make it okay. And you know, I think if you made it that far away from the tower out into the woods, like, you know, you had some preparation, a map to get there, you knew where you were going. And I think that's really important if we want to dismantle, you know, colonial states and the white supremacy they uphold. We have to think about, like, well, when after we set it on fire, where are we going? We have to create, you know, the foundations of actual community to rebuild. You know, and I think the Zapatistas and what Soden are both really good examples of putting years and years into building a foundation so that they could resist and set that system on fire.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that the tower is in the distance, because there's also perspective that to be gained from getting that distance, and that yeah, I think oftentimes when something is dismantled and broken down, it takes that stepping back and stepping away to really see it for what it is and to envision the new way forward, right? And once that's in your rear view or off in the distance in some capacity. Yeah, I love that so much. Yeah, I love this tower card. It captures the essence of the tower, which is to break down and dismantle the things that are not functioning properly in your life and finding new ways forward. And it's never an easy process, but I would say 99.9% of the time, if not 100, is absolutely necessary. And I feel like this card really encapsulates that. I love to, I'm kind of going through these all in sequence. I wasn't necessarily planning to, but I'm getting really excited talking to you about all of them. The grandmother moon and the grandfather sun are so lovely. And I love that they take on the roles of elders with the experience and the knowledge and the, I guess oftentimes traditionally the sun's seen as more masculine, the moon more feminine, and so it's encapsulating that as well. So yeah, what was your inspiration for these two? I feel like they go really well together as kind of contrasting aspects of the same, or two sides of the coin.
When I thought about actually the shooting star, grandmother moon, grandfather sun, and mother earth,
yeah, I love this Mother Earth card. Oh my goodness.
In my political life, you know, I've been known to say, anyway, in indigenous cultures, we didn't humanize our gods and goddesses. And I think there becomes a lack of imagination in the like entirety of what gods or goddesses are when we humanize them. And so I didn't want to make these beings, which to me they're beings of like gods and goddesses. I didn't want to humanize them and make them small. I wanted us to look at them like, you know, at they're like what mass entities these beings are.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. It's a really nice way to really embrace the energy of those symbols and I say symbols, but those energies of the sun and the moon. I love this judgment card, which I believe is referencing missing and murdered Indigenous to spirit. It's such an important aspect of ongoing aspect of Canadian
missing and murdered Indigenous women.
Mm-hmm.
Am I stalling or are you?
I'm not sure. I think we're back now. Okay, great.
Yes, it is referencing missing and murdered Indigenous women. And
that's such a great reference to judgment.
Yeah, I wanted it to, you know, have many sides to it. This is where we rise up and stand against this ongoing, you know, act of genocide. Also, you know, I wanted that aspect of how when we stand up and we throw those judgments that have been cast upon us back into the faces of our oppressors, and it makes them uncomfortable and it makes them face their own judgment.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a necessary part of the process. And I feel like that encapsulates the judgment card so beautifully because that's a huge aspect of that particular card. Now we get to get into the minor arcana. I'm so excited. I love, you'd mentioned earlier that you picked a color theme for each of the suits. And I love that the arrows or wands have the red. The cups have this beautiful, vibrant pink. The weapons have this gorgeous, like purpley blue color. And then the drums are green. So the arrows or wands, weapons, swords, and drums or pentacles are all renamed. So what was your inspiration for picking those symbols for each of those suits?
So I knew that I did want to rename them and make them relevant. Arrows to me just they seem the most naturally tied to wands. I didn't want it to be a huge leap for anybody. And so that was an important aspect of it too. Cups really did remain cups. That just still seemed relevant. The coins and pentacles, aside from being about finances, are about connection and community. And so drums worked for me there. Pardon me?
Well, with the green and all the natural environment that's in these cards too, like it's such a grounding in that earth element, which I absolutely love. And each of these,
I thought it worked shape-wise. I thought it worked shape-wise too. And, you know, when I thought about the drum and the webbing, I thought, you know, there is a similarity in shape and design-ish.
Absolutely. No,
as well
they're
as that.
100%.
Yeah. And weapons, I chose weapons because I did want it to have that, like, a bit more of an added pain to it, because that is, you know, the experience of colonized people, of marginalized people, of, you know, of the world majority. It does hurt more. And so that's why I went with weapons.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that makes so much sense. And the sword suit isn't known for being particularly soft or warm and fuzzy, and I feel like the translation into weapons is brilliant. This one in particular, I mean, there's so much imagery with the pierced heart for the Three of Swords. I believe in the guidebook you were referencing the origins of each of the different swords and the impact that they've had, and that's such a great reference point for this particular energy. Yeah.
So there was several things I thought about in this card. So there is the swords representing the colonizers of you know, the so-called Americas, the French, the British, American, and the Spanish. And so that's why I chose those three swords.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I love the court cards too. Well, and one thing I just wanted to add that I really appreciate, like I have a lot of decks that will rename each of the suits, but some of them it's kind of hard to reference which is which one. And this is very, very clear. Like even with the arrows, the Eight of Wands is so often depicted showing arrows shooting forward for that sense of forward momentum and everything. So that ties in so beautifully. And I love that the pages are scouts. That captures that energy so in such a lovely way. And then the warrior for the knights, of course, is so great. And then I love that the uncles are the queens, and then the auntie is the king.
Well, actually,
because so often there's
this
that.
Is how I
oh,
see
is
it?
it?
The uncles
Oh,
are
okay.
still the kings, and the aunties are still the queens. But you know, I just think in a lot of cases, the aunties are a more complete version of their suit. You know, because they are depicted as having that emotional maturity as well. I think they are a more complete representation of their suit. And because for a lot of us Indigenous folks, we are matriarchal, and so it's queens on top. As so they are still the queens. They just simply, you know, are in charge. Yeah. And from an Indigenous perspective, when that like less receptive or masculine trait of you know, not dealing with the emotions and so exhibiting aggression, um
Mm-hmm.
that is seen as being more emotional. And so
Mm-hmm.
in some indigenous worldviews, such as my own, um, we see
Mm-hmm.
men as more irrational than other genders because they are more likely
Mm-hmm.
to turn to anger than confront their emotions, and they are less willing
Mm-hmm.
to cry. And so we see
Mm-hmm.
that inability to cry as being irrational.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I love that so much. Um, yeah, I love all of the court cards, and the court cards can be super challenging for new tarot readers. I know that was something that really stymied me when I first started reading tarot, but I feel like the way that you've articulated them and centered them in present day lived experience really captures the energy in a really beautiful way, in a very accessible way, which is really amazing. Before I ask you about the fabulous Oracle of Colonization, I just was wanting to point out for anybody that's watching that you also have in the guidebook some really amazing spreads, which I really have enjoyed working with.
Thank you.
At the beginning, yeah, they're so great. Like, I love that this daily tarot spread gives you the opportunity to incorporate the oracle and then 2 tarot cards. I feel like a single card spread is really great, like our single card pull, but there's a story to be told with multiple cards together, and it helps to flesh out the energy of the reading in a more complex way that is often, I find personally, way more helpful. And I love this in progress spread too. It's such a helpful tool for figuring out your way forward, or if you have a card that's pursuing you relentlessly. For me, that's been the 5 of Swords recently.
Oh, wow.
And this, yeah, I know. I've pulled it like a ridiculous amount of times from various decks in the last week. And then there's the straight up tarot spread is amazing too. Like, I find all of these spreads are so great for working through different things and finding your way forward. And I just wanted to mention that because they're really fantastic and such a great resource.
Thank you. I'm
So,
working on a
oh
tarot
yeah,
spread book.
oh, that's
I
exciting.
write at least one tarot spread a week. So,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
and the spreads in there are, I think most of them are from my, I write a spread for the tarot journal group chat I host. And most of them are
Yeah.
from there, except for the straight up spread. That's a spread
Yeah.
created as a tarot reader who really wants to tell people what's going to happen when you don't follow the advice I'm giving you. that,
I
that's
love
where
that so
that
much.
spread came from.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's even
Yeah.
just as
So
a personal reader, there can be
when they
resistance.
come back and say it didn't work out, it's like I can look at the other half of the spread and say, oh yeah, it did.
I love that so much. Even as a personal reader, during my own readings, I can feel resistance to things, but if I don't listen, then I find out quickly that, yeah, I hear you with that 100%. So tell me more about the tarot meetups, because you have that one, and also there's a monthly group that you host as well, right?
So I do host a tarot party once a month. And so you pay $10. Everyone's on the same time. It's kind of like live tarot
Mm-hmm.
readings, but there's max 10 of you, and
Mm-hmm.
you're all there to get a reading. It has that same atmosphere though, but without all
Yeah.
the money talk, because all happened. And
Yeah.
on Sunday mornings, and I also have an evening slot. Um, I host tarot journal group chat. And so that's for
Mm-hmm.
anybody who journals their tarot readings, whether it's readings you're doing yourself, or if
Mm-hmm.
get readings regularly from one of the many people who post, daily or weekly reads online. If you are using those and
Yeah.
journaling them, then we have a tarot journal group chat where
Oh, that's great.
yeah, where we discuss
Yeah.
our tarot journeys, and then I provide a spread that, you know, people can optionally do during the week if they like.
Oh, that's so fabulous. So that's every Sunday?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, I love that so much. It's so helpful to get together with other people like that and talk about your tarot journey and things that you're working through, and to have a spread to work through is so helpful. I'm a huge fan of spreads because I find it allows me to look at things from a different perspective, which is often helpful. Yeah, I love that. And then your tarot party, when is the next one? It's typically at the end of the month, right? So end of
Yeah, it's
August?
the last Thursday of each month. And I
Nice.
have
That's
to be
awesome.
looking at a calendar to tell you what day that is. So the last
Yeah, no, that's
Thursday
beautiful.
of August. Yeah. And
Oh,
so,
fantastic.
yeah.
Yeah, I will 100% be joining the next one. I'm sorry to have missed the last one. I think that's such a great idea and resource, and community builder as well. Like that's, I love that idea so much. Yeah, so I wanted to ask you about the Oracle of Colonization too. Um, I find there's a fluency between the two decks, but the Oracle of Colonization has its own feel, which is amazing. And yeah, just the color tones for this particular one are so lovely. And the themes that you work through with this are definitely hard hitting and necessary, I feel, and it's great. One of my absolute favorite cards from this deck is a Righteous Rage. This is just
Mine
such a
too.
stunning card. I can't get over how just visually beautiful it is, and there's so much fire to it, and yeah, I love it so much. So
So,
what was your inspiration for this particular card, and what went into the design for it?
um, so with the Oracle of Colonization, they follow the major arcana. They're a shadow to the major arcana. And they shadow the major arcana in different ways. And, you know,
Mm-hmm.
Righteous Rage is that shadow of the Lover's card, because the Lover's
Mm-hmm.
is where you follow your heart, you follow your truth. And, you know, Righteous Rage is a truth that has been taken from colonized people via pacification. And
Yeah,
we're told so often that, you know, we're denied righteous rage because it's not, um, you know, polite, which is the card
mm-hmm.
before it tied to the Hierophant. Um,
Yes,
and so here I have like a Karen with her head exploding. Um,
yeah,
and, you know, when we realize that instead of listening to the Hierophant, we need to listen to ourselves and we declare truth, you know, righteous rage is a part of that truth. And that's the part that, you know, lets us let that pain out so that, you know, there's space for healing. And
yeah.
it's so important, and it's so important to have that fiery destructive rage to, you know, um against these things that have hurt us and harmed us, and against these hierophants and against these karens. um
Yeah.
and so yeah, and so it's a cop car on fire with fireworks going off in the background. So this is really, really digital.
Mhm.
All the
Mhm.
oracles of colonization, their background is a scanned piece of birch. Some of them are
Oh,
digitally altered
beautiful.
and some aren't. And
Yeah.
and then the
You can
art
really see the birch.
is done in various ways, from collage to models I photoed and collage to
Mm.
art I did straight up um, on, you know, digitally, and other times I drew on the birch bark and scanned that and then adjusted and altered it.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's so many textures to this particular card. I just like the vibrancy of it is amazing. And I
yeah,
love that it's followed by the ugly cry. Because, like you said, that transition of finding release through rage and anger and then giving yourself space to grieve and to cry. Like, I love that transition because it's it's such a part of a grieving process for anything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
This is one where you
I
can
love the
really
texture.
see that birch background too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's almost like the texture of the tears, which I absolutely love. That's beautiful.
I wanted
Yeah,
them
no,
to
I
be
love.
like a rushing river.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I love it so much. That's so great. Yeah, and I love the transition. Like, there's the resting bitch face, which I've been told over the course of my life I have on a constant basis if I don't smile. So I'm always trying to like half smile at least so that
Yeah.
people don't think I'm angry.
And then
Um,
like the progression in this one, the art
yeah.
is all me drawing digitally except for the
Mhm.
eyes. And
Oh,
they
beautiful.
are a cut out of my daughter's eyes, who is the
Oh,
chariot, and
yeah,
the major seven. Um,
yeah, yeah.
so these are her eyes.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So there's like subtle things. When I'm done, dear.
I don't know what that means.
Soon. So there's some things in here that are just really subtle progressions for myself, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's beautiful. I love that there's connections between the major arcana and this deck, like direct with this one. Like, that's so lovely. Yeah, and I love that you've added all of these different elements. And then when it comes to 9 entangled in 10, the red path, I love the visual connections between these in terms of the colors that you've used and the tree imagery. Just with like, I feel like this the bark texture here is just so beautiful, and the way that you've aligned all the different colors and stuff, it's absolutely gorgeous. I love the little mouse. It's absolutely sweet. Great.
Yeah, I had fun with
Yeah.
this one. I used a really rough piece of birch bark and made it blue for the
Oh,
water.
lovely.
Um,
Yeah,
and
that's so gorgeous.
10, I actually painted 10 on the birch bark, but then I put it through various digital filters.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Got a
yeah,
beautiful texture to it. And
thank
the
you.
way that the colors blend, it's really stunning. Yeah. I love that there's with a lot of the cards in the Oracle deck, there's this underlying kind of blue and purple tone to it, which those are some of my favorite colors. I feel really drawn to it, but it's really beautiful. And
Thank you.
yeah, and then the rise up and the know your enemy. Hello, I'm an ally. Like, these are really great.
Yeah,
Great
and you
cards.
know, this person can really land you here too.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's really, really beautiful. And then the next step is the House of Oppression and then the Land of Ancestors. I guess it would be this one to this one. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
the Land of
So then,
Ancestors, I think, is my favorite.
yeah, it's beautiful. I love the texture of this card. It's very kind of dreamlike, and I love that there's this circle here, which is almost like the play of sun. Like, sometimes in photography, you get that image of the round circle, and I just love that that's included here.
Yeah, that's what I
It's
was
very
trying
kind
to
of,
create with it. Yeah.
yeah, no, it's beautiful. It's really, really lovely. Yeah, I mean, this whole deck is just incredible. And then systemic, internalized, and lateral. I feel like the transition for me, the transition between these just really made so much sense and is really, really lovely.
Yeah. Yeah. These ones were hard. I knew they needed to
Mm,
be in here. And
yeah.
I thought about them, their titles a lot. And, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I, I originally I thought, you know, I automatically thought like, you know, systemic violence, internalized violence, lateral violence. But then I was like, we don't need that word there over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
We know
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
and and then, you know, coming into sexual lied, which was part of
Yeah.
this progression. But I definitely wanted to put the power back at this point, especially tied to the moon.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And so
Yeah,
this is a heavily digitally altered photograph of me, actually.
Oh wow.
And my medicine is tied to sexual healing and relationship
Yep.
healing, and so that's why I chose this card
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's heartbreaking, but also beautiful.
Yeah. And then that was the same feeling into identity and gender. I wanted to put the power back in again.
Yeah.
And originally I thought I was going to draw like two faces, both two-spirit person and a residential school survivor having their hair cut off. And then and it wasn't working for me, so I put it away. And then the next time I brought it out, I just knew what I was going to do. And so this I had a bunch of broken mirrors set up in front of a mirror, and birch bark as well. And then these blue candles.
It's going to rain.
Yes, I know. And, took photographs of them, and and then just straight up photographed the pink candle and cut it out and put it in front. So it's the most abstract, but I really enjoy just creating this card and having it come to life the way I was like seeing it. And yeah.
Well, there's so many layers and dimensions to identity and gender, and I love that this card really celebrates that. There's so many layers and dimensions to it, and that really comes through strongly here. I love it.
And it's been, these two things have been this constant, ongoing aspect of colonialism for colonized people across the globe, both identity and gender being erased and the fights back against it. And it's different than, I think, the, than the Euro-Western fight for pride. I think it's different, but because it's about our whole cultural identity and preserving and reinstating our knowledges of identity and gender as a whole cultural understanding.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the last three cards for this deck, and then we've reached an hour. I'll let you go. Your son has been so patient. My goodness. Yeah, I love this whole self card. It's absolutely stunning. The colors and the imagery is just, oh, I love it so much.
So yeah, there's a lot of people in our communities who are mixed race indigenous folks, and that's not white. They're world indigenous on both sides, and are often expected to choose one aspect of their identity, and the rest of us experience that on micro levels in comparison. And so I thought they were the biggest representation of the struggle for a whole identity that they have to go through. And so I thought they were the strongest representation of whole self. And then to tie healing and Mother Earth together, that just made sense. And this I made out of a model. I made a model birch teepee and photographed it. And the sticks are toothpicks. They actually were not to size with the birch tree model. So I had to make them to size in the photograph.
Yeah.
And
beautiful.
Then I wanted to bring us back to the beginning of the cycle. And so then we come back to zero. as spirit,
Yeah.
you know, which are like, so spirit and entitlement making up the two sides of that Fool card.
Mhm. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. I love it so much. I remember when you first posted the healing card with a couple of different options for it, and I just love this image so much. It's really, really stunning. And that whole idea of a safe space and safe haven in which to go through that process is really beautiful.
Thank you.
And this spirit card is stunning. It's absolutely gorgeous. And I love that it creates the bookend to the entitlement card.
Yeah. And the spirit card
Really
is like a picture of the sky showing a portal that is known to some of us shown in the sky. And it's like each layer of this card is just like zoomed out more. But showing
beautiful.
so this is like the most zoomed in, and then the second, and then the third, and then the least zoomed in. But it's the same aspect of sky throughout it.
Oh, I love that use of different layers and aspects. That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. At
Yeah.
the end of the journey.
And it sort of, I thought, created sort of a portal look to it, even if you don't know that you're looking at a portal.
Yeah.
Like, I thought it still had a portal-like feel to it.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. So, we'll wrap up soon. Your son, like I said, has been so patient, which I appreciate so much because I've occupied a lot of your time. So where can everybody find you? You've got your website and also Instagram and Facebook. So
I don't really recommend finding me on Facebook. I'm not particularly active on there, and it's mostly just where people I personally know follow. But yes, follow me on Instagram at Any Case Tarot, and I have a YouTube channel also, and everything's in the link tree here on Instagram, and also my website, and you can book readings in there and other things, explore around. And the deck, I just finished paying the customs payment and everything yesterday, so I'm really getting close to everything arriving for shipping out to folks. I only ordered a few extra decks. I sold 300 decks, so like that's really good, and it's really awesome for a first time. It isn't a lot of profit, and so I might Kickstarter this again if there's demand for it, or set up a pre-order again if there's demand for it sometime next year. But there will only be a few available after I'm done all the shipping. I'll put them up on September 1st.
Ooh, exciting. That's amazing. Yeah, this deck is such an amazing resource for tarot, and I love also something I didn't mention before, but you've also included all the astrological correspondences for each of the cards, which is so fantastic, and it adds a whole other layer to the practice of tarot if you want to add it, which is really wonderful and super helpful.
Thank you.
So September 1st is the day. Mark your calendars, everybody. That's so exciting. Oh my goodness. So do you have people helping you with all the shipping process? Because I would imagine like shipping 300 decks is not for the faint of heart. I'm sure there's lots.
We can see where I'm living here, right? Can I point to it?
Yeah.
Point to it. We can see where I'm living here. So they're going to be stored at a neighbor's house. And then my friend Emma of Cardinal Traditions, who, if you got the bougie package, you're getting their earrings.
They're so beautiful.
Hanu and I are going to travel with everything down to their place to have space to pack everything up, get help there with Emma. Hanu will have other kids to play with, And
Yeah, these are
and
the earrings. They're so
Emma
beautiful.
has shipping with Canada Post, and so we're going to be able to print up the labels from home at their place.
Awesome.
So
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, that's so exciting. Yeah, this is such an amazing deck to work with, and I'm so excited to think of everyone receiving it and working with it. And yeah, and just one last little note. I love, I typically detest check boxes. It's not something that I'm a fan of, but I love this one. It's actually really good. It's easy to open. And I love that you've taken such an eco-friendly approach with it. And there's lots of information on the back. It's just the love and care that you've put into every aspect of this project, from the guidebook to each of the decks to even down to the box, is just, I'm so impressed by all of it, and I'm honored to have a chance to work with it and to interview you. And this has been such a pleasure. So thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me and chatting through. I have such an increased appreciation for each of the cards now that we've been able to chat about it, and I'm so excited for it to get out into the world and for everyone to experience it, because it's such a magical deck, and it's a beautiful creation. Yeah, thank you for that. So I will be posting this on my feed and also in my stories and Instagram TV as well. So if you're just hopping on now and you've missed some of it, then please check out the link, because it's been such a great chat, and I really appreciate the time that you've taken to walk through this with me. So thank you so much.
You are
and
welcome.
I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend.
Thank you. You too. See you later.
Sounds great. Bye.
Bye.